Hi everybody. Tonight I want to shoot what I'm going to call a companion video or follow-up to a video I shot last night about tank filtration. I really can't do things that are scripted. I've even tried doing like bullet points to keep myself, I always laughingly tell myself to stay on target. But in this particular case, I just find that what works best for me is just to sit and chat and just kind of talk about what's on my mind. So that's the most comfortable video, but it is not necessarily most informative, and I tend to jump around a lot, and I usually wind up doing one of these videos to compensate for all the stuff I missed in the previous video. So when I watched my video about filtration, I noticed I was kind of vague on a few points. Nothing major, but I do want to sort of go back over a few things to make sure I made it clear. If you are a beginner and you're watching this, I guess it would be important to understand a few things. First of all, I just sort of took for granted that you either understand the nitrogen cycle or you can find out about it somewhere else. And while that's true, if you're going to be watching my videos, I may as well explain it to you the way I see it. And I'm going to explain it very quickly and very simply. And it is simply that your fish produce or waste products in your tank, whether it's fish or plant material, any kind of biological material, breaks down into ammonia. There is a species of bacteria that lives in your tank. It lives on the surface area in your tank, not in the water column. So the idea of swapping used tank water from one tank to another is a myth. It does not work. It has no impact. You're simply putting dirty water in a tank. There are ways to do that, and I've actually done a video about that. I'll put a card in here for you to look at that video if you want. But you've got this bacteria that lives in your tank, and it eats ammonia as its food source. Its waste product is nitrites. There's another species of bacteria that lives in your tank that uses nitrites as a food source, and its waste product are nitrates. And that, in a nutshell, is the nitrate or the nitrogen cycle. Ammonia gets produced in your tank. Bacteria deals with the ammonia. The end result is nitrates. A different kind of bacteria deals with that, and the end result is nitrates. Your plants will take up some of the nitrates, and I've discussed that in other videos as well. I'm not going to get into what happens with nitrates and all that stuff either. This is going to be more focused on filtration. So that in a nutshell is your nitrogen cycle. Now, in the other video I talked a lot about fish waste, and I spoke about it in terms of solid waste, and I chiefly was speaking about solid waste because I was talking about your actual filter cartridges picking up the physical debris within your tank. But the chief purpose of that video was talking about your biofiltration in the tank, and that's where fish waste becomes really important. There's a lot more to fish waste than poop. The CO2 that your fish produces after it metabolizes the oxygen is a waste product from your fish, and ammonia is another waste product. Urine that is produced from your fish is a waste product that gets into your tank. And if you have freshwater fish, the softer the water is, the more urine they produce. And some fish can produce their own body weight in urine every day if they're in soft enough water. And that gets back into osmoregulation and total dissolved solids and water hardness. And again, we will get to that series of videos when I get to them. It's coming, trust me. So your fish are producing all this waste, and they're producing all this urine. A lot of people don't realize that fish actually express ammonia directly from their gills. In the same way, the dissolved gas is exchanged from the blood, just like we do when we breathe. This same process is happening with the dissolved gases in the gills of a fish. And one of the waste products that's exchanging out of the gills into the water column is ammonia. So it's starting as ammonia. It doesn't have to break down or anything. Fish are just producing ammonia in your tank while they're swimming around. So you need to make sure you are on top of this nitrogen cycle. You need to understand the nitrogen cycle, which I've now at least given you an idea of and gone over. Again, if you want specifics and all that, there's tons of information out there that you can go and find to get into all that. One of the other things that I think I was a little vague about is I talked a lot about water flow, and I want to make it very clear that there's a difference between water flow and turnover rate when you're talking about filtration. And I got sort of convoluted the way I kind of interchangeably talked about them, again assuming you sort of understood the difference. When I talked about that, well, I'll talk about this tank. This tank has I don't know the actual volume that goes through this new sponge filter that you see on the right. I have no way of knowing the actual amount of air that's pulling the actual amount of water. So I don't even know how to guesstimate how much water is coming through that. I do know how much the manufacturer says goes through my two filters. Now, I don't do brand names or anything like that, but my filter that is set up for up to a 70-gallon tank moves 340 gallons per hour. And my filter to the left of the tank that is for up to a 40-gallon tank moves 210 gallons per hour. So that's 550 gallons per hour of a turnover rate, and I'm not counting my sponge filter at this point. That is a 10 times, it's a 55-gallon tank, so 550 gallons an hour is moving through my sponges, my biomedia. Now, on the far left there, you will notice I have an 850 gallon per hour power head. So my tank itself actually has, again, not even counting the sponge filter I've just added, I've got over 1,400 gallons per hour moving around the tank. So that's the circulation rate of the tank. 1,400 gallons an hour is not the rate of flow when you're talking about filtration. The rate of flow for my filtration is only 550 gallons per hour turnover. And that means the total volume of the tank goes through my filters 10 times every hour. Now, when you're talking about stocking tanks, and let's assume we're talking to somebody that's first day never seen a goldfish bowl before. By the way, a goldfish bowl is a terrible idea. Don't ever get one. Everybody knows the 1 inch of fish per gallon of water. 5 seconds thought will make you realize that that's not some hard and fast rule. There's a vast difference between putting 7 neon tetras in a 10-gallon tank that totals 10 inches versus putting a 10-inch pleco in a 10-gallon tank. The bioloads can't even be compared to each other. The size of the fish and the size of the tank. There's just so many variables that instantly come into play when you really start thinking about this rule of 1 inch of fish per gallon of water. However, if you've never seen a goldfish bowl before, you've got to start somewhere, and there's got to be some sort of first foot in the door, basic, where do I begin learning from? And that's fine. That's where you begin learning from. So when you start learning and you start seeing these things about, you want this much filtration in your tank and you want that much filtration in your tank, you can't go by the number it says. When it says, oh, it's for a 70-gallon tank and I've got a 55-gallon tank, that's fine. I mean, if you're not going to get too crazy with overstocking and you're just kind of getting your toes wet with venturing, getting a little creative, you can use that as a sort of rule of thumb. But you really need to look at the gallons per hour. And that still breaks down to how much water is flowing over the biomedia, how effective is the biomedia, and then if you're going to start getting into heavily stocked tanks like I've got, and that's why in the other video I didn't say it's overstocked. To me, there is a point where it's overstocked. You just physically have too many fish that can't fit, they don't get along, the fish are too big to physically move around comfortably in the tank. There's a lot of different definitions for overstocked. Some people might argue some of my tanks are overstocked, and that's fine. I consider my tanks very heavily stocked, and again, this all goes back into bioload management and understanding what's going on with my water chemistry and all that kind of stuff. I do a series of videos called Layman's Lectures, and I've got a brackish tank, I've got a marine tank. I don't do a whole lot with the marine tank, but I talk a lot about the brackish tank, stenohaline animals versus urohaline animals. So I do get into a lot of this stuff, and I've already touched on the total dissolved solids and things like that. And I've kind of fizzled out on that, because again, every time I start thinking about it, it's just tied to so many different aspects of everything. So back with the filtration is where I'm trying to stay on target here. Your bioload, again, is what everyone is talking about when they say, you know, oh, if you're going to put these extra fish in your tank, you know, or if you've got a dirty fish, they'll talk about like something like a pleco or a goldfish, you know, carp, koi, or considered very dirty fish. And they do poop a lot. That is part of what is considered a dirty fish. But they also express a lot of ammonia out of their gills. They just really put a heavy bioload on the tank. Body mass has a lot to do with it. You know, a fish with lots of frilly fins and not a whole lot of body mass obviously just isn't going to produce as much bioload. So you have to consider fish size versus volume of water they're in, and that sort of thing. So when they talk about you want 10 times the turnover rate, that's what they mean by that. They don't mean water moving around the tank, and they don't mean anything other, you know, they're not talking about picking up the physical debris. You need to move that much water over the biomedia in your tank every hour to keep up with the amount of ammonia that's going to be produced in your tank. I said in my other video, I talked about you have to take the food to the bacteria, and of course the bacteria lives on your biomedia, your sponge filter, your bioballs, whatever it is. The food is the ammonia, and that's in the water column. And remember, the bacteria is not in the water column. It's not flowing around and swirling in the water. It lives on the surface of things. So if the water doesn't flow across the surface of things, you're not bringing the ammonia in contact with the bacteria for it to take care of it. So flowing around the tank is important, because you do have surface area in the tank, obviously. Even your glass has this bacteria living on it. That's why you'll often see it recommended that you only scrape your viewing pane rather than all of the glass, because when you do that, you're just wiping out bacteria. That's helping keep your tank under control. So when I talk about moving the food to the bacteria, that's what I mean. You've got to flow this water through your filters. Now, when you've got fish, you can see in my tank, for example, right here on the right, I've got some water sprite hanging. You can see the roots hanging there. This is clearly an angelfish tank. You can see some movement on the plants and whatnot, but I have 1,400 gallons an hour of water minimum moving around that tank right now. That is hard to believe, but I really do. I have, not counting the sponge filter, I have 550 gallons an hour alone going through my filters. But because of the way I've placed the outflows on the filters, the way I've angled my power head, the way I've placed my rocks and woodwork to deflect and angle the water flow, diffuse it, I'm moving 1,500 gallons an hour roughly around that tank without disturbing angelfish and without having my floating plants swirling around like they're in a whirlpool. So once you start understanding how things work together and tie together, you really can start getting creative and expand way beyond the whole inch of fish per gallon of water. And of course, plants taking up nitrates and stuff like that plays a big part in it. And that's what makes this hobby so amazing and wonderful, is you can just learn and learn and learn forever. So I'm going to wrap that up. I feel like I'm getting kind of talking in circles here, getting kind of pointless at this point. So thank you for watching. Feel free to ask any questions, any comments. If there's anything you would like me to discuss in further detail, by all means ask. And keep prodding me about the TDS video, and I will get it out there. I promise I will do more. And it's going to be more than one. It's going to be a series of stuff. I'm just going to get back to doing my, what I call my layman's lectures on, various aspects of water chemistry, and total dissolved solids pretty much plays into all of that. So thanks for watching again. Please stay tuned. Please like, please sub, and I will see you soon. Thanks.